Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Method in Madness. This is episode number 28. Today, we are going to talk about a very important aspect of being human, and that is questioning. The preparation to asking right questions involves sharp listening skills, analytical ability, research, and presence of mind. The process itself can be a powerful learning tool for the child. And to understand how we begin to think and formulate questions, how to look at questions, why are they important, and why do we need to start this process early in life with our children. We have Manjima Chatterjee with us. Manjima Chatterjee is a drama explorer, teacher, and an occasional writer. Manjima read English at St. Stephen's College, Delhi University, and sociology at the Delhi School of Economics. She has a PG diploma in drama and education under Maya Krishna Rao from Shiv Nadar University. Her articles have appeared in Arts Praxis, the Arts in Education Journal of NYU Steinart, as well as in anthologies such as Nation, Nationalism, and the Public Sphere. Her articles also have been published at the Serendipity Arts Festival Collection and the newspapers such as The Hindu Business Line, Education World, and Hindustan Times. She was shortlisted for the BBC's International Radio Playwriting Competition and won the Hindu Metro Plus Playwright Award in 2013. Her book, Two Plays on Hunger, was published in 2018, and her play, Mountain of Bones, was also published in Creating a Profession, Desperate Voices of Indian Women Playwrights, an anthology of works by female Indian playwrights. Manjima has conducted workshops on drama in education with teachers from schools across the country. And she works and she teaches drama and is the Central Arts Curriculum Lead at Shiv Nadar Schools. Welcome, Manjima, to Method in Madness.
Hello, Vaishali. Thank you for having me here. Hello, everyone.
So just to let all our viewers know that Manjima and we are going to talk for the next 45 minutes, and then we'll open the discussion. We'll take your questions and we'll try to answer as much as we can. And during our conversation, please feel free to interact with us through the comment section. Manjima, thank you for coming. And today, we are going to talk about something which is very, very important, critical, crucial in the way we live, the way we are, questioning. Now, questioning is a very difficult but a very important topic. And usually parents and teachers who are with us today, most of our audience, viewers who come, are teachers and parents from all over the country. And I think this is something which all of us look at with some challenges in mind and some skepticism also. So, Manjima, I would like to ask you, how do we look at questioning as a parent and as an educator both?
Well, first up, Vaishali, research shows that the one thing that can take us ahead in life, no matter what obstacles we face, is curiosity. It's the questions that naturally arise in our minds. And it wouldn't perhaps be wrong to say that all of human civilization, all of human existence exists because we have a whole lot of questions which have not been answered. The problem, though, is that our education systems and our parenting systems are usually dedicated towards answering all questions and shutting us down. And that's a very interesting thing, because the best thing about questioning is that questions are best asked and best explored when you don't have immediate answers. So that's an interesting dichotomy, because you're asking questions in order to get answers. But how is it that answers tend to shut down questioning? But that's how it is. Somehow, as teachers and as adults, as parents, we tend to feel that questions need to be answered. And that's a very interesting thing that I found in my practice, particularly as a drama teacher and also as an educator, that the art of questioning is perhaps best developed by the parent, the adult, the teacher, learning how to answer questions. It's not quite as straightforward as it seems. So, yeah, questioning is very, very important. I think the only way that we can move ahead in our lives is by the motivation to be, to want to know more, to go further, to learn more. That's only going to be possible if we are allowed to develop questions, to ask the right questions, and to get to where our questions are taking us.
In your experience, Manjima, when does a child actually start questioning? I mean, asking questions. Because you're a mother of two beautiful children, and you are a fantastic teacher of so many children. So when do you think children start actually questioning, asking relevant questions?
Okay, so that's actually two questions, Vaishali.
Yes, there are two questions. Yes, I know.
Yeah, so well, I mean, children are asking questions even before they can properly articulate words. So I mean, in Bangla, there is this thing of saying "eta ki," "eta ke." What is this? What is that? And those are some of the simpler words to ask. And you have Hindi equivalents in every language. You have that equivalent. What is this? What is that? Those are some of the first things that babies learn to speak. So, by the time they're about a year and a half, 2 years old, they're already asking those questions, even before they can articulate sometimes. They're pointing to things and asking you, what is that? What is this? Name that. The desire to give shape, form, a clear, concise cognitive picture, to form clear, concise cognitive pictures of things, to be able to understand the world. So questions are being asked from the moment a baby is born, and from the moment that they can actually start articulating it, they do. Those are some of the first things that babies actually ask. When you say relevant questions, I'm not quite sure what you mean. Relevant to what?
To context, basically, where children are asking contextual questions. Where they want to know answers to, asking difficult questions or asking important questions relevant to context.
Children are always asking questions. Anyone who has interacted with children from a very young age, the questions are always, and very interestingly, although sometimes we don't take this into account, because we tend to think of knowledge, the journey of knowledge, as being a progression from concrete knowledge to abstraction. The fact is that research has shown that a lot of what children perceive, babies perceive, is actually abstract. And for them to actually enter the process of education is to move from an abstract way of thinking into a slightly more concrete way of thinking. So the kind of questions that we tend to think of as scientific questions or contextual analytical questions, those questions take a while to form, because they're still kind of trying to understand the world in those terms. Because when a child is as young as 6 months or 7 months old, they're able to perceive big ideas, broad ideas in certain ways. For instance, they're able to perceive the idea of change, but they may not be able to perceive the difference between my relationship with my mother and my mother as a person herself. So that sort of that distinction between me as an individual and my mother as an individual probably takes a while to develop. And we do know that a sense of humor, for instance, which is a very clear indicator of one of the clear indicators of somewhat analytical thinking starts in children after 2 years of age. So we do know that, that there is a certain progression towards a certain kind of thinking, which I suppose you might call a kind of contextual questioning, or contextual learning, which happens after 2 years of age. And that is also when the kind of questions that children ask tends to change. So you'll find more of why questions and less of what questions. So a child who's younger than 2 might actually be asking a why question, but they'll still frame it as a what question. They'll still ask you, what is this? Even if they're trying to understand how does it work or why is it happening?
Why is it here happening? Yeah.
Yes. But they'd still frame it as a what question because that's what they understand. So questions actually, right from the first day that a child steps out of their world, especially if you're, from the day the child goes to a park or something, I'm sure questions are brimming full in their minds. And it's important, I think, as adults and as educators, for us to be able to understand the questions that are being put out, rather than expect the questions to take a form which is acceptable to us. And that's, I think, a major shift in the way we have to think about things.
Yes.
It's important for us. Yeah.
Yes. In fact, my next question is this: how do we adults or the teacher and the parent, let us look at them a little separately right now. When a child asks a question which could be very mundane, very, very lay, how do you respond to that question as a parent? And how do you respond to that question as a teacher? What is your way? How have you responded to questions by your children and your students? How do you
I think answering questions is the most difficult thing, Vaishali. That's what I was talking about. So here's the thing. As a teacher, I've been very privileged to have been trained in drama. And the thing that drama does is that it gives you the tools to be someone who may not have all the answers, but may still be able to satisfy a questioning spirit. So one of the things that, one of the tools that we use, for instance, is something called teacher in role. And that's actually a way of developing questions. So suppose a child has a question, how does this work? How does this particular, motor car, how does it work? I might actually turn that into a drama-led lesson of actually putting that at the center and imagining a whole scenario around it, wherein I invite children to talk about it, and through that, questions come. One of the things that most of us would have faced in a scenario with children in there is that children come from a position of very low self-esteem. They look at themselves as people who know nothing, and adults, especially teachers, as people who know everything. So to ask a question is to be even smaller than I already am. So the tendency is to not ask a question, therefore, to just accept whatever is being told. And only if I am being asked a question, a lot of teachers do this, by the way, they tell the child how to frame the question. They tell the child, so ask me a question about the structure of the motor car. So then the child is automatically, they're kind of modeled into, they're put into that little module, and they say, okay, so this is the question I have to ask, and this is what an acceptable question looks like. So what drama does is, it allows me to step away from that entirely and stop being the authority figure, the person who knows everything. And in that moment, to become someone who maybe knows less than the children. To say, I don't know. What do you suppose it is? So to actually then step away and to take on a role register, which is not one that implies that I know everything, immediately puts the children in a position where they feel, okay, so it's okay to ask my questions, because here's someone else who has the same kind of questions, and it's an adult, so it's
Yes.
okay. So I found that sort of thing very useful when answering questions, because I find that when we find answers together, when we co-create responses, so to speak, the answers are more meaningful, carry more weight, and have a deeper response. Most importantly, evoke further questions, lead to more questions, so that the next day the child then comes back with, I have another one.
Yes.
And I've encountered this in my classes and with my children as well. It's an important step to take sometimes, to say, I don't know everything. I'm an adult, and maybe I know some things, but maybe I don't know everything about everything, and that's okay.
And I think that's a good practice for any adult.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's important for us to remember to keep ourselves in check sometimes.
Yes, absolutely. How do we create that environment, Manjima, drawing from drama? Or how does a parent create that environment of enabling the child to ask questions?
Yeah, that's a very important thing, Vaishali.
Hmm.
Yeah, sorry, go on.
Yeah, so that is what I mean. At times, parents, they start modeling, and when they model, they're modeling so that the child benefits out of it, not because there's a inherent change that happens within them. How do you look at that? How does a parent or an adult create that safe environment where the child and the parent equally at the same time can ask questions and look for answers?
Yeah. So you know what? I'm going to talk about from the context of drama again, because that's a space that is very, very empowering in many ways. And one of the first things that drama does is it creates a level playing field. The thing is that, I mean, think of a classroom. Okay, I'll talk about the home space in a minute, but think of a classroom right now. You enter the classroom, you have a teacher's desk at one end and all the students together on one side. And the teacher's desk is naturally, it's bigger, it's higher, it's that kind of deified spot where the teacher comes in, and students aren't allowed to sit there. Students aren't allowed to touch the desk more often than not, except to clean it. And the students are only allowed to be on one side of the room. So very frequently when the teacher's not there, the children, what do? They run out, they get on top of the teacher's chair. They
Or sit on the table.
pretend to be the teacher, they sit on the table. The moment the teacher arrives, everyone's scooted back again. What is that? It's essentially it's a claim to power. The teacher's chair is a position of power. The teacher is the person who knows, who's going to come into that space and who's going to, light the bulb of knowledge, so to speak, fill up the empty vessels with a lot of wisdom. That's not how it works, though, is it? That's not how a truly great learning transaction works. A really effective learning transaction would have the teacher as a guide or a mentor, taking the students along on a learning journey where the children learn for themselves. Because if they don't learn for themselves, it's never going to stick. It's never going to stay with them. It is not something that will help them to grow. Now, what drama does is, drama takes the teacher's chair and effectively throws it out of the room. So one of the things that we do in drama is we adopt something called, like I was talking about earlier, role registers. There are various role registers that you could take up as a teacher. It could be the role of someone who knows what's going on, but doesn't have things totally under control. It could be a register of someone who has a vague sense of what's going on, but doesn't really know the details. It could be someone who has no clue what's going on and is trying to find out what's happening. It could be someone who knows everything but doesn't want to help you. So it could be a variety of things. It could be the devil's advocate. It could be someone who's put you in a spot and is refusing to let you out of it. What happens when you take on a role register is that the students find themselves in a situation where they must step up. They must not be passive or be completely comfortable just receiving, but they have to kind of get up and take charge of the situation. The moment that happens, the moment you open up the space, what is going on is that there is a sense of power sharing. What's happening is that the child suddenly feels, oh, so this is something that I can actually have an impact on. This is a situation that I can actually negotiate on my own. Or even if I can't, I have to. I have no choice but to negotiate this. So I have to take on a leadership role, and I have to take on a problem solving role. And there is this person, and she's here to help me, or he's here to help me, but it has to be me doing it. The moment that shift happens, the child immediately starts to ask questions that are deeper, that are more relevant, that's going to help them to solve the problem, that's going to help them to go in the right direction. You don't need to prod. What you can do is, if you see that they're going in the wrong direction, you could maybe throw in a question and say, how about trying this? You could even do that to confuse them, even if they're going in the right direction, and make it about them figuring out the right path. See, at the end of the day, what are we here to do as teachers? Are we here to fill up our students' brains and minds and hearts with all sorts of information and knowledge? I mean, in the Google era, how is that? It makes no sense.
No sense at all.
No. So what we are here to do is to enable our children to become empowered inquirers. They're people who should be going out into the world with confidence in themselves to ask the right questions, to find their way in life, to be able to make the right choices. And when I say right choices, there's never a single right choice, right, in a situation. Right choices are always dependent on our context, are dependent on what we are interested in. So to be able to look at your condition and to make a choice depending on the context, depending on what you want, which means to be able to look inside and actually ask yourself, what is it you want? So to be able to be reflective. All these skill sets are what is going to take our students up to a place where they are going to be good, and I use the word good in a very knowing kind of a sense of an ethical good citizens. To be people who are, and it's not possible to be a good citizen really if you are not a critical
a responsible citizen.
Absolutely. You have to be somebody who's a critical thinker. You have to be somebody who's willing to be collaborative, who's willing to take risks, who has the ability to contribute to the world as a citizen of the world. How are these qualities going to develop if I cannot come into that space with the awareness that I am someone who has the ability to ask questions, has the ability to negotiate the world? And that sense of empowerment needs to come really early.
Yes.
Because what happens is, in our education system, we train children for 12 years to not ask any questions at all. More actually, 14 years, 15 years sometimes.
14, yeah.
Yeah. And then we take them to higher education and we say, okay, ask questions now. How many people actually have the ability to ask questions by them? You've actually spent 14, 15 years shutting them down, shutting down their minds at the time when their brains are growing. So, yes, so that's one of the ways in which drama actually works, by enabling the shift of power structure, by empowering students to actually think for themselves. A similar thing can happen in the home place as well. And there are ways in which parents can open themselves up to questioning by simply being the people who don't have all the answers. It's okay to be someone who doesn't have all the answers. You can still retain your sense of respect, the sense of love and awe that the child has towards you, without being the person who knows everything. A very typical example might be the kind of relationship that grandparents have with grandchildren all the time. If you see the difference between parents' relationship with a child and a grandparent is frequently okay to say, okay, I don't know. Why don't you tell me? But a parent feels that they have to know.
Yes.
The parent feels they have to control the situation. You don't have to control your child. You have to include your child in the journey of learning. You have to take them along. You have to play with them. You have to give them the scope to be silly and stupid in front of you without calling them out for being silly and stupid. In fact, I mean, it's absolutely fine to say, okay, that was a really bad question. And at the same time, to be able to laugh about it and to say, you know, when I was your age, I actually asked worse questions. So I'm going to answer that one. It's all right to expose your vulnerabilities. Because if you're not vulnerable, your child is never going to be comfortable asking questions before you. So I think there are a lot of comments from the audience.
Yes,
Vaishali.
yes. We have a lot of comments coming in. I think, yes, Durgesh, they are just comments. They're not questions yet. They are just sharing their thoughts. So Mitali is saying, no doubt the principals of schools tell teachers not to sit but carry on teaching without sitting. The teacher then shares a seat sometime with a student. This is on the power sharing thing that we were talking about. That's what she's mentioning. And then Shashi ma'am is here. Shashi ma'am is saying, enabling learners to be empowered inquirers. That is what you have done for each child under our care, Manjima.
Thank you. Thank you so much, ma'am.
Manjima, how does a parent bring that change? I mean, we all say that, yes, you have to change, you have to expose your that part of you which is vulnerable, that part of you which is still learning. Because a parent, when a new parent especially, she feels that, yeah, I have to kind of take care of my child, and I have to make sure that I am available and I'm there and I'm doing everything right. So that word right, getting the right answers for all the questions, and then expecting the same from the child. How do you think that affects the growth of the child, and what can a parent do to start kind of changing herself?
I think, first and foremost, Vaishali, we have to first acknowledge that our world has undergone a sea change from the time we were children to our children now, the next generation that is coming up. The internet has opened up the world in ways that was not possible when we were younger. And of course, there was a reason that knowledge was valued and held up above everything else. And this is knowledge in terms of information-based knowledge. But now that the internet has made information so easily accessible to the world, information-based knowledge no longer has the kind of importance that it did when we were younger. So therefore, we are looking at different kinds of knowledge now. And frankly, I mean, we should have been looking at it much earlier. I'm someone who's very happy that this change has happened because, frankly, we were not equipped to deal with changes in our world. And perhaps our generation, more than anyone else, has seen so many changes. We saw computers come in. We saw mobile phones come in. And now this is a world which has changed beyond recognition. From the 80s to 2010s, now 2020, these 40 years have been incredibly full of change. I mean, I think it's probably the largest significant kind of change that has happened in such a small span of time in human history that we know of. So given that is the case, it's important to understand and value that different kinds of knowledges exist. And it is important to embrace them. For instance, emotional knowledge is a very important aspect of knowledge which our generation really does need to embrace and understand. We all talk about mental health. It's a topic of conversation these days. But how is it
Yes.
going to happen? How is mental health going to be a reality if we cannot actually embrace emotional knowledge for what it is, to acknowledge it? There are those amongst us who are naturally empathic, who reach out to other people, who are able to connect with people in ways that others simply are not. How do we value that? Do we give that space? How do we value curiosity about the world, which comes out in sometimes very harsh kinds of statements? Where children are often, we all know that children can be very cruel. They'll tell you as it like it is. They'll say, "Mama, you're looking fat," or they'll say, "Oh, I don't like that. I don't like what grandma got me." And we all rush in to say, "Oh, no, 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 no. Don't
Yes.
say it like that. Be nice."
Yes.
The question is, what are we teaching our children? We're telling them that it's only okay to behave in set patterns, right? We're not teaching them why. We're not telling them, okay, it's all right if you don't like what grandma gave you, but how can you express that in a way that maybe is not hurtful to her? So we're in a bit of a rush to stem things, to stop things, to find stopgap solutions. Children need time. First and foremost, more than anything else, children need time. So when a child comes to you with a question, it's important to be able to hear it. If you can't answer it at that point of time, it's perfectly fine to say, okay, you know what? I'm really busy. I can't answer it right now, but I will. Remind me at this time when I'm free, and we will sit down and we will talk about it. And it's important to find the time to do so.
Yes.
Because if you're not available to our children, there is no way that conversations are going to happen, and there is no way questions are going to come. We have to be available, and once again, I'd like to emphasize, this is not about time. It's not about how much time you have, but what you do with it.
Yes.
So it's whether in the time that you have with your child, are you open to the child? Are you available to them? Are you listening to them, talking to them? Are you playing with them? Play is a great way to open up the space for questions, for discussions, for conversations. You get to know all sorts of things.
Yes, and playing, just simply playing.
Yeah.
And I think, Manjima, play stops, teachers and parents, they stop play after a certain age. First of all, I would like you to talk about it. I mean, maybe from your own experience of being a teacher and a parent, how do you maintain, the spirit of play throughout with your children?
Well, I have an almost teenager now and a 10-year-old. So it's not easy all the time to find a way, especially because, the elder one's a girl and the younger one's a boy, and they're always at loggerheads. They're forever on each other's case. But we find the time, we kind of make it like a routine that we have to find the time to take time out and play. Playing can be all kinds of things. Playing can be horseplay, playing can be playing football in the rain, playing can be Monopoly. But play, pretty much like drama, puts everyone on the same playing field. When you're playing carom with your child across, it doesn't matter whether you're the adult and they're the child. If you're cheating, you're cheating. And if
yes.
If you drop the rani, you drop the rani. So you come straight back and start from scratch. So it's a great way to enable children to feel like they can interact with you in ways that increase their confidence, in ways that enable them to talk to you. Spaces for discussion, spaces for play are really, really important. In my household, sometimes, when my husband and I, we get really caught up with work, and we find it difficult to come back. My son is the one who brings us back every single time, saying family game time. And we give it the importance it deserves, because it's there's no alternative to it. There's nothing that works as well, and there's nothing better for a healthy family than to be together, to play together, to be able to engage with things that, and the playtime is not necessarily the time when the questions will come, but the questions will come because the playtime was there.
Yes.
Because it happened, because you enabled that space to be there. Similarly, in a classroom space, teachers spend so much time talking at students that we forget that, there's no way we're going to get responses like that. We have to be able to bring the students into a space where they can respond, where they feel empowered, where they feel like they want to respond or they want to ask questions. And that's why play is very important. So in our school, for instance, we emphasize circle time, where we bring, and this goes on until, middle school, senior school, where we encourage students to kind of come in and we play games. The teacher and the students, they play games together. As important as it is to deal with issues that arise in the class, to, talk about rules, regulations, all of that, that is important. But play is a very important part of circle time as well. Because frankly, none of those conversations are going to leave an impact on the child if they are not able to connect with you. And there's no greater tool. That's actually part of the reason drama works so well. A lot of people think that drama is less serious than the other art forms, than music, than dance, than visual arts, because there is so much of games and so much of playing in drama.
Yes.
But I would argue that that's precisely the reason drama is so effective, and that's precisely the reason that children love it so much, because it gives them that space of feeling empowered, of having a voice, of being able to be the same as everyone else. It's a very, very important concept to keep in mind. If you want to build a classroom that questions, if you want to build a home where you have children that question, it's very important to have spaces that allow play, that allow people to interact in ways that are not hierarchical.
And also, when you have this this habit or this culture of questioning, or culture of asking questions, and asking questions without any kind of hitch or any kind of hesitation. Once you have that, then also the scope of doing something new and better in life when we grow up, that also increases. The scope kind of widens. But I'll ask you to share an experience also which has put you on spot, maybe, or has kind of made you think that why this is important. Anything that you could share with us, questions that could be difficult, because children do ask difficult questions. They do ask difficult questions, and usually, I'm not saying everybody, but usually they are avoided. They are not listened to, and they are not heard, and the children are expected to find the answers on their own without any support or help. Can you please share anything which has happened or which you have experienced regarding difficult questions?
So actually, the example that comes to mind is one that is slightly difficult to talk about also. So I would just like to tell all the people listening to this here that I am going to talk about something which you may not be entirely comfortable with, but I think it's important because I'm talking about circumstances that I've encountered with my children, as in my students, and questions that have come up from them. This is not fictional. This is absolutely real, and that's why I'm bringing it here. And I'm sure all of us have at some point of time found ourselves in a situation where we've encountered a question which we're not sure how to answer. More importantly, we're not sure we want to answer. And then what do we do there? So we know we live in extraordinarily violent, difficult times, where news media coverage particularly is very loud, very violent, very non-nuanced. And there are screaming headlines for everything, and screaming anchors besides. That's another story. But even if you're looking at newspapers, it's difficult for children to be able to sort out things for themselves when they sit in the common room watching TV with everyone else, watching things which they have access to because they're watching it along with the adults, but they don't have access to because they don't understand it and no one's explaining it to them. So their response naturally is to take the words, take the ideas, and to formulate their own answers. So I started teaching in my present in Nadar school in 2012. And that was the year that the December incident with Jyoti Singh happened. And that particular incident was so difficult because we had a group of grade 3s sitting in front of me, all of whom knew that something had happened, all of whom had read at least a headline, were aware of TV sharing things, but not a single person had had an adult sit down and talk them through it. So after this December incident happened, I was in school, and there was a lot of, one of the children had abused another children. One of the children had abused another child, saying, "Main tera rape kar dunga." And it became a very big thing because, you know, how can a child say such a thing? They're 8 years old. And what nonsense? How can it? So immediately everybody starts thinking, ki abhi to matlab, you know, throw the child out of school, shut the system down, close it, protect them. But how is that going to help? That word is there. It's there in their lexicon. It's there in their environment. They're dealing with it. They have no idea what it means. So we shut the classroom, got everyone to sit in a circle. And the first thing I did was I actually talked about rape as an act of violence. And I said it's when one person hurts another person in an extraordinarily terrible way. So first up, it is someone who is, we're talking about a person who is in the hospital in a terrible condition. Would you ever want to put someone in a terrible condition like that? And of course, then there was total silence. I opened the floor for questions. I said, I'm not going to talk about things, but I want you to ask me any questions. And I promise that I will answer it to the best of my ability. There were no questions, none at all. So I said, all right, what I'm going to do is I'm going to give each one of you a chit of paper. And I want you to write down on that chit of paper any question that comes. You don't have to write your name. I won't know who's asked which question. I just want to know what are the questions, and I'm going to try and answer them. And then they did write their questions. And it was extraordinary. It was, you know, the questions ranged from what is gang rape, what is rape, to why does my father call this person an abuse? What does this abuse mean? To, you know, what happened to the girl? Why is she in the hospital? So there were all these questions which they had, which they could not articulate because no one wanted to talk about it. So we actually sat down, and without going into very graphic details or, you know, anything, I just said that there are some things that I can answer, other things I might answer on a personal basis, but I'm glad you brought up these questions. And we tried and answered some of the things to the best of our ability. After that, it was important to give them closure. Because you can't talk about something that's as difficult as that and then move on to the next period and start teaching maths. You know, it doesn't work. So I had to actually reach out to the other teachers and say, my class is having a conversation today. And I'll let you know when we can come back to normal classes. But right now, we are not doing that. So we spent time, we had the circle time, we had conversations, we answered some of the questions, left some of the questions out there and said, there were some questions which said, how is she feeling? We said, okay, so can we try and imagine how she must be feeling? She must be in a lot of pain. But can we send good thoughts her way instead of dwelling on how she's feeling? Can we send good thoughts? Can we try and think about how we can maybe make her feel happy or her parents feel happier than they are right now? So we tried to move things towards a positive direction. After that, we went out, we played. We went to the playground because it was important to release their energy. They played, they gained some element of normalcy back again. We came back, we had a class hug. In the second half of the day, we went back to normal classes. But because we had that conversation, that class was able to talk to each other and to me, but more importantly to each other about important things from a perspective of empathy. And that for me was the biggest thing. For me, this conversation was not about answering their questions. It was about helping them firstly to realize that it's important to articulate the questions that are in your mind. Two, to create a lens of empathy through which they can approach a situation as difficult as this. And to actually try and look at the world in a way that actually looks at building a better world rather than to feel sad or depressed that the world is sometimes as horrible as it seems to be. But it was important to take their questions. It was important to give their questions the value, the respect that they deserved. The much more difficult thing was dealing with the parents. Because none of the children, by the way, went back and told their parents about this conversation. None of them, not one. But I reached out, I wrote to each parent and I said, you need to have this conversation. We had a conversation in the class. There are some complex issues that are going on. It's important for us to acknowledge these issues and to have this conversation. There were other related things also going on amongst the children. So it was important to bring attention to that. When I met the parents, one and all, everyone's response was, I can't talk to my child about things like that. So we said, we must have a workshop with the parents to help them to engage better and to know that answering questions like this, or more importantly, answering is not as important. Enabling your child to have this conversation with you.
Yes.
Raise the questions in front of you. There's nothing more empowering than that. And you don't need to have answers. It's perfectly fine to say, I don't have answers. I don't know. I'm seeking answers like you. What do you think could be an answer? Why do you think? So there was one question that is common naturally. It's there in everyone's minds. Why did they do this? Why did those people do this? Why did they hurt her? Is there an answer to that question? But to be able to actually articulate that question is to be able to share your hurt, to share the deep injury that you have felt inside when you heard of this. Even news of violence leaves us impacted. When we hear about violence, when we see violence performed in front of us, there is a response. There is a deep human response to that. It hurts us. It's important to acknowledge that hurt. It's important to say, let's try and find a way out together. So, yes, pretty much as difficult as it gets.
Yes,
but no one has to face a situation like that.
But it's a learning as well. I mean, when you face such questions, it's a learning for you. It's a learning for you as a parent. It's a learning for you as an adult, and probably the starting point of the art of questioning is probably to look at what the question is about. Actually, is it really a question? Is it really a yes and no question, what is it about? I think, yes. Manjima, we have already spoken for 50 minutes. This is a conversation that can go on. But I think
Sorry.
we should start taking questions, because there are lots of comments that everybody has shared. Mitali, Shashidi, Revati, Durgesh, and they are, they are our regular audience members who come and interact with us. I will take Mitali's question. How can a teacher play with the children in a scheduled class? I tried but felt unsafe because the principal feels it is a waste of class assignments, class, as parents complain.
Okay. It's very important to have the system support you. But you can also get the system to change its mind and come to support you. That's because I think everything finally boils down to how well we plan for our classes. And if we plan for our classes that the play is going to be the way in which we learn today, initially people look at you as cons because they think, oh, you're playing, how can you be learning? But eventually people do come around to understanding that it's not necessarily dichotomous, that in fact play is not just can be, but is a great way of learning to the point where children start to take ownership for their learning. The best thing about play is that it enables children to take charge of their own space. And the moment that happens, learning proceeds in leaps and bounds. You don't have to tell the child to go in a certain direction. They're going there already. Do I have time for an example?
Yes, sure. Yeah, we do. Yeah, we do.
Okay. So again, when I was teaching grade 3, and we were kind of studying habitats in EVS. In language, we decided to pick up a text called "Kyun Kyun Ladki" by Mahashweta Devi, and the Why Girl. It's an excellent book by Tulika.
And an excellent production by Gillo.
Yes, a very great production by Gillo. That's right.
Yeah.
So, "Kyun Kyun Ladki" is such a great text. We picked it up in English class to look at the questions actually, and somehow while we were working on the text, the children picked it up and they connected it with what they were beginning in EVS. Before we knew it, the children we started by creating mythical animals. We went from "Kyun Kyun Ladki" to "Why the Leopard Has Its Spots," which is a story by Rudyard Kipling, and and somehow, again, that was because of a connection a child made. We went from there to animals and why they are the way they are. Our questions with regard to animals. Why does a dolphin have that peculiarly shaped body? What is the purpose of its snout? Why is a polar bear white? Is a polar bear white? Why do zebras have stripes? And from these questions, we went into habitat because it kind of connected naturally again through the questions. And by the time the EVS teacher was framing her questions, we had already completed the objectives. We had completed all of it, and the children made they made those dioramas and they made charts, and it was just full. My class was full. It was supposed to be done over a period of 1.5 months, and the EVS teacher was looking at my face and saying, "This is all over. What do I teach now?" So play is fantastic. Play will cover if you go about it the right way, then approaching subjects through play will actually take much better care of covering your syllabus than chalkboard teaching will. Which doesn't take away from assessments and things like that. Of course, you conduct those. Of course, you do.
Shashidi has a fantastic answer to that. Shashidi is saying, Mitali, get the principal to play too. Yes, very important. Get the principal to play, get the parents to play. Yes. I think once they go through it, they experience it themselves. and they feel how it frees them up. I think experiential learning for adults is very, very important in this case. We have time, Manjima, for just one last question before we end today's session. I would like to take Sudha Ramani Kirti's question. She's asking, sometimes the child's questioning will lead to power struggle, be it with teacher or parent. How to deal with such situation? How to convince the adult to change the mindset?
Yeah. So the thing is that a power struggle can only happen if there is an existing hierarchy which is supported, right?
Yeah.
So somebody is supporting that hierarchy and wanting it to exist, which is why the power struggle is happening in the first place. So, the thing is that when it comes to questions being asked, and children will sometimes ask questions that make you uncomfortable, not just very difficult questions like the one we talked about earlier, but also otherwise questions like, why should I listen to you? Why should I do what you're telling me to do? The question is, how as an adult are you dealing with that? What is it telling you? If the child is asking you that question, are you only hearing that question as somebody seeking to question your authority? Or are you hearing that question as the child's need to assert herself or himself because of something? Get to the bottom of the question. Try and understand what is provoking the child to ask that question.
Yes.
And the best thing to do is to always, as an adult, as a teacher, it's so important to respond, not react.
Yes.
If you answer that situation with a, you have to listen to me because I'm older than you, that's a reaction, and that is effectively shuts down the question, increases rebellion. That question is going to come back to you in a harsher format again. Instead, if one could actually say, okay, you don't have to listen to me, but can I ask you where that question is coming from? What happened? Can we talk about it? That's a response. If you can actually get to responding, the first thing it does is a response that involves empathy. It disarms the opponent. It disarms the person who's up in arms. Because it's suddenly, if there's no one fighting you, you can't fight. At the most, you'll say, okay, I don't want to talk to you. I don't want to talk to you. I'm going away.
Yeah.
And that's okay. Sometimes children need their space. But they will come back. They will come back because you have shown them that you're willing to engage with their need and not with their reaction. Once you do that, once you can actually get to the question that matters, the child will know that they can come back to you. And power struggles only happen, like I said, where you set up those structures. If you consciously move away from that structure and focus on empathy instead, it's always going to be much healthier. And it will always help, contradictorily, it will actually help the child to respect you more and to look up to you more. Because they see that you are able to disarm them, you are able to handle their reactions, and you don't respond to their reaction with a reaction of your own.
Thank you. I hope that that gives you some line of thought, Pavitra. Sudha Ramani. But with that, I think we have come to an end of our conversation. Thank you so much, Manjima, for such a delightful conversation, and which was so true. And when these conversations come up from a place of practical, of practical experiences, of real people, real questions, and real answers, I think it gives us more faith in who we are and what we're doing. And I think thank you so much, everybody, all the audience members who joined us today, all our viewers, to be here and participating in the conversation. Maybe Manjima, whenever you have time, you can go through all the chats. They have been talking to each other actually, which is what happens in these chats. So they start talking to each other, which is what we want. We want to start conversations, and I think this episode today has really given us a flow to think about questioning and what not to think about questioning also. Thank you, Manjima. Thank you so much for coming today to our show, and thank you everybody who were here with us all through. Please like and subscribe to our channel Joy of Drama if you've liked what we have been talking about. And this is basically something that we are trying to do to bring teachers, parents, caregivers of children on one platform to look at children as they are. So thank you so much and have a very good night. Thank you.
Thank you for this opportunity, and thank you everyone for engaging. Your wonderful questions and very relevant. Thank you.
Thank you. Good night.